It happened on Christmas night while the snow outside our window glowed like glass under the streetlights, and the scent of cinnamon still hung in the air. My father stood at the head of the dinner table, his voice steady but cold. "Ryan," he said, holding out a small silver keychain, "this belongs to you now." I remember how everyone stopped chewing, how my fork froze midair. Because those keys, those shiny, ordinary keys, were to my apartment. The home I'd spent $30,000 renovating. The home I was still paying rent for. For a few seconds, no one spoke. The sound of the clock ticking over the fireplace seemed louder than the murmured Christmas carols from Mom's old stereo. Dad cleared his throat, mistaking silence for sentiment. "Your mother and I wanted to surprise you," he said, smiling proudly at my younger brother. "Our gift to you, your first real home." My heart stuttered. "What?" I whispered. Ryan's grin spread slowly, disbelief painted across his boyish face. "Wait, this is mine." Dad nodded. "Yours to live in, decorate, build your future. We're transferring the lease tonight." Then he turned to me, still smiling as if this was all perfectly reasonable. "Emily, sweetheart, you'll need to pack up and move your things out by the end of the week." It was like hearing someone else's nightmare out loud. The table blurred. The gravy boat tipped in Mom's trembling hand. And then when I didn't respond fast enough, he added so casually it burned, "Actually better make it tonight." "Tonight," I repeated. "You're serious?" Ryan laughed, thinking it was a joke. "Come on, Dad. You don't mean..." But Dad's jaw tightened. "I do. You'll have plenty of time to find a new place, Emily. Your brother deserves this opportunity. He's starting fresh and we want to help him." "Help him?" Those words sliced through me. I'd helped him my entire life, paid his credit cards, once co-signed his car loan, even lent him money for that disastrous tech startup. But sure, tonight, I was the one who had to start over. I looked at my mother silently, begging her to intervene, but she just lowered her eyes. She'd spent years cushioning Dad's choices, patching over his sharp edges with quiet excuses. "It's Christmas," she whispered weakly. "Let's not fight. Too late for that." I stood up, pushing my chair back so hard it scraped against the wood floor. "Dad, that apartment is mine. I paid for every fixture, every tile in that kitchen. He didn't even blink. And we appreciate that. But it's still in my name, Emily. You've been renting it from me technically. Ryan's lease will start tomorrow." I almost laughed at the absurdity. Technically, the word he always used to sanitize betrayal. Ryan looked torn, half thrilled, half terrified. "Emily, maybe we can share it or..." "Stop!" My voice cracked. I wasn't going to beg for space in a life I'd built myself. "No, you enjoy it. Both of you. Merry Christmas." I left the table before anyone could follow, before the pity could drown me. Upstairs, I stuffed clothes into a duffel bag, my hands shaking. Each item I packed felt like another brick pulled out from under me. Photos, books, the throw blanket Mom had knitted last winter, all reduced to evidence that I'd ever existed in that space. Downstairs, I heard them talking in low voices. Ryan's confusion, Mom's tears, Dad's stubborn certainty. I didn't listen. When I walked out, snow had already begun to pile along the curb, soft and white and merciless. I loaded my car in silence, the cold stinging my fingers. From the window, I saw Ryan watching me. He looked like he wanted to say something, but Dad's shadow behind him kept him still. As I shut the trunk, Dad stepped onto the porch. "Don't make this harder than it has to be," he called out. I turned toward him. "You already did." The drive across town felt endless. Every streetlight reflected off the frost like 1,000 tiny needles, every carol on the radio an insult. I pulled into the parking lot of a cheap motel just before midnight. The clerk gave me a key without looking up. Room 207, beige walls. The cloying scent of stale air and cheap detergent. I sat on the bed, coat still on, and finally let the tears come. I'd always thought betrayal sounded like shouting. Turns out it sounds like your father's voice saying, "Move out tonight," over the sound of Christmas bells. I spent that night staring at the ceiling, replaying every decision that had led me there. The sacrifices, the long hours, the belief that hard work guaranteed respect. I'd built my independence on numbers, plans, and trust, and just like that, it had been erased by a man who thought family meant obedience. But lying there in that dim motel room, something shifted. Between the humiliation and the anger, a strange clarity began to rise. My father thought he'd stripped me of everything. He hadn't. He'd only reminded me who actually built it. By morning, my tears had dried into resolve. I checked out of the motel before dawn, drove straight to my office downtown, and sat at my desk surrounded by blueprints, property deeds, and spreadsheets, my true inheritance. That's when I opened the file labeled Carson Holdings Parent LLC. I'd registered it quietly a year ago after Grandma Mary's lawyer mentioned a clause in her trust. Something about asset expansion rights for her eldest granddaughter. I'd almost forgotten about it until that night. I clicked through the documents. My name, my authorization codes, my control over multiple family assets, hidden, dormant, waiting. The properties weren't just Dad's or Ryan's. They were part of the Carson Trust, and by Grandma's stipulations, I had managing rights once I turned 30. I turned 30 2 months ago. For a moment, I just stared at the screen, heart pounding. The irony was delicious, cruel, perfect. My father had given away a single apartment he never owned. What he didn't know was that I held the deeds to nearly every building he'd built on family land, including his own office. The humiliation of Christmas night began to morph into something sharper, cleaner. Justice. I opened a new document and typed a title across the top in bold letters, Phase 1 Collection. Then below it, Review ownership records for Carson Holdings. Notify trust administrator. Secure legal counsel for property consolidation. File occupancy reassignment paperwork. Each line steadied my pulse. Each task was a brick in something stronger than revenge. It was restoration. As the sun rose over the skyline, the golden light hit the frosted windows of the very office tower my father claimed as his empire. I sipped my coffee and smiled a slow, knowing smile. Move out tonight, he'd said. Fine. I'd move out and move up, because by next Christmas my father wouldn't just be living in my apartment. He'd be paying rent for it. And that was just the beginning. Anger was the only color left, a deep, furious red. My bitter morning coffee was a poor comfort. My apartment gone, and the echo of my father's words still pulsed in my chest like a bruise. But anger is fuel, and I had plenty of it. At 7 a.m., I was already in my office downtown, pulling out every folder, every spreadsheet, every old trust document my grandmother's lawyer had ever sent me. For years, I'd ignored them, assuming they were just ceremonial papers about family wealth preservation. I was wrong. Buried under a pile of scanned PDFs, I found a file named Carson Family Trust Activation Terms. It was dated 25 years ago. The opening clause made my pulse slow. Upon the 30th birthday of the eldest grandchild of Mary Carson, management rights of Carson Holdings shall transfer in full. I read that line 3 times. Slowly, deliberately. I turned 32 months ago. The next line sealed it. All properties, commercial or residential, registered under the Carson Trust shall fall under the authority of said grandchild until such time as their death or written abdication. I sat back in my chair, heart thudding in my ears. My grandmother, God bless her foresight, had built a legal fortress around our family wealth. And my father, too arrogant to read the fine print, had never realized that the fortress didn't belong to him. By 9 a.m., I was on the phone with Attorney Hines, the same man who'd handled my grandmother's estate. Emily, he said after a long pause, you found it, haven't you? I think I have, I replied. Does this mean what I think it means? It means, he said calmly, that your father's empire is in fact your inheritance. You are the acting manager of all trust-owned properties. Every Carson building, every asset listed under the trust, falls under your direction. My fingers tightened around the phone, including the one I was just kicked out of, especially that one. I laughed quietly, the kind of laugh that tasted like disbelief. So all these years he's been acting as if everything was his. But your grandmother anticipated that, Hines interrupted. She structured the trust to activate automatically, bypassing any interference. The moment you turned 30, the system transferred control. It's legally airtight. For the first time in 24 hours, I breathed easily. When we hung up, I opened the trust management portal, a database I'd barely looked at before. Rows and rows of assets filled the screen: addresses, valuation numbers, tenant lists. My father's entire portfolio was sitting there waiting for authorization. And the top corner blinked primary trustee Emily Carson. It wasn't the victory I felt first. It was validation. My phone buzzed. Mom. I hesitated, then answered. Emily, she said softly. Can we talk? Your father, he's upset. He didn't mean to. He meant every word, Mom. You saw it. She sighed. He's proud. You know that. He just wanted to help your brother by giving away what wasn't his. My voice was steady, now colder. He's been treating family money like personal pocket change for years. Grandma warned me this might happen. Your grandmother was a good woman, Mom said, a hint of defensiveness creeping in. But she didn't always understand how your father. She understood perfectly. I cut her off. That's why she left the trust in my hands. There was silence. Then Mom whispered, He won't take that well. He doesn't have to, I said. He just has to accept it. After we hung up, I stared out the window. Snow was still falling, blanketing the city in quiet white. Somewhere out there, my father was probably sitting in his office, sipping his coffee, oblivious to the fact that everything he thought he owned now answered to me. By noon, I had sent the official activation request to Heinz's office. Within the hour, the confirmation email came through: transfer of managerial rights completed. Carson Holdings, now under the authority of Emily Carson. The words looked surreal on the screen. I wasn't just getting back to my apartment. I was taking back my legacy. I spent the rest of the afternoon combing through each document. Property by property. Building by building. The numbers were staggering: 10 commercial sites, 6 residential complexes, and dozens of long-term leases. My father hadn't just mismanaged family money. He'd built his identity on it. At 4 p.m., I opened a new document on my laptop and typed, Phase 1 Notification. Step 1. Inform all legal and financial parties of the change in authority. Step 2. Audit current accounts for unauthorized expenditures. Step 3. Issue new management directives to Carson staff. Step 4. Schedule meeting with key property tenants. It felt clinical, procedural, until I realized what it really was. It was revenge, yes. But not the kind that burned bridges. The kind that reclaimed them brick by brick. Around 6, my office phone rang again. I almost ignored it until I saw the caller ID, Frank Carson. I let it ring once, twice, then I picked it up. Emily, he said, voice clipped defensive. I got an email from Heinz. Something about a trust activation. You want to tell me what kind of joke this is? It's not a joke, I said simply. You might want to read the attached documents. I did. They say you're the primary trustee. That's impossible. No, it's legal, I replied. You just never read Grandma's conditions. There was a pause, a long, sharp one. I could almost hear the sound of his pride cracking. Do you have any idea what you're doing? He demanded. Yes, I said. Fixing what you broke. Don't take that tone with me, he snapped. I've built this family from the ground up. You mean Grandma built it, I said quietly. You just inherited it. And now it's my turn. He laughed bitterly. You think you can handle it? You've always been good with numbers, Emily, but this isn't a spreadsheet. This is a family. No, I said. It's a business. You just forgot which one you were running. Before he could answer, I ended the call. For a few seconds, I stared at the silent phone, the reflection of city lights flickering on the screen. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from adrenaline. I'd just crossed a line I could never cross. At 9 that night, the office was empty except for me. The building's heating system hummed softly. I stood by the window overlooking the skyline, those glass towers glowing against the snow, half of them legally mine now. I whispered Merry Christmas, Dad, and closed my laptop. Tomorrow I will begin making calls. To banks. To tenants. To the very people who'd always called him boss. By the end of the week, The entire Carson network would know who truly ran the empire. And when my father tried to give away another one of my homes, he'd have to sign the lease under my name. The call came the next morning just after sunrise, when the city was still quiet and cold. I was sitting on my couch, what little was left of it, sipping my cold coffee, and rereading the trust documents for the 100th time. My phone buzzed, and when I saw the name Hines, I knew something had shifted again. "Emily," he said, his tone calm but firm. "It's official. The full transfer has gone through the state registrar. You are now the legal trustee of the Carson Family Trust, effective immediately." For a heartbeat, I couldn't speak. "So that's it. That's it," he said. "Every property, every account, every holding under the Carson umbrella now answers to you, including your father's office space and the apartment you mentioned." I let out a slow breath. "He's not going to take that well." Hines gave a short laugh. "No, I don't imagine he will. But Emily, your grandmother knew exactly what she was doing when she drafted this. She trusted you to protect the family wealth even from the family itself." His words sank in heavy but steady. I hung up, walked to the window, and watched the frost melting along the glass. Below, the city buzzed awake, oblivious to the small earthquake that had just changed my life. While reviewing Grandma's papers, I felt a familiar protective rage bloom in my chest. She hadn't just left me money. She had made me the last line of defense. My eyes caught a detail on a jewelry appraisal form. Her simple gold band with the small sapphire was listed as heirloom of primary trustee. I frowned, wondering why a piece of jewelry would be treated with such legal precision, then set it aside, a question for a different day. By mid-morning, I was at the bank meeting with the trust administrator, Ms. Lopez. She slid a thick folder across the table. "You'll want to review these," she said. "Your grandmother's trust was built like a fortress. It not only transfers control, it records every expense your father's made for the last 15 years. 15 years. I flipped through the pages, scanning the figures: investments, withdrawals, family gifts. My father had been using trust funds as a personal wallet. Ms. Lopez cleared her throat. "You're also listed as the sole decision-maker for future disbursements. That means you'll approve or deny all requests from beneficiaries, including your father and brother." I looked up at her. "So they have to come through me now," she nodded. "Yes, ma'am. You are the gatekeeper." The words echoed in my mind. The gatekeeper. On my way out of the bank, I passed a newsstand. The headline on the local paper caught my eye. "Carson Developments expands to new waterfront site." There was a photo of my father shaking hands with a city official, all smiles and self-importance. The caption read, "Frank Carson, the man behind Seattle's most ambitious real estate dynasty." I stared at it for a long moment. That dynasty wasn't his. It had never been. Grandma Mary built the foundation, and I was the one holding it together now. Back at my office, my phone rang again, this time Ryan. "You did something," he said the second I picked up. "Dad's freaking out." "I didn't do anything. The trust activated just like it was supposed to. He says you're trying to steal everything from us." "From you," I almost laughed. "Ryan, you've been living off money you didn't earn for years." "That's not fair," he shot back. "I've been working with Dad." "Working," I interrupted. "You're on his payroll as a consultant. You make more posting vacation photos than you do in that office." He went silent. For once I had hit something that stung. "Look," I said softer now, "I'm not doing this to punish anyone. But the trust belongs to me now. That means I'm responsible for all of it, including the mess Dad made." Ryan's voice cracked. "You don't have to be like him, Emily." "I'm not," I said. "That's the point." I ended the call and leaned back in my chair, the city lights flickering against the glass walls. I could already feel the storm gathering. By late afternoon, the storm arrived. Dad showed up at my office without warning. The receptionist barely had time to announce him before he stormed through my door, red-faced coat, unbuttoned voice booming. "What the hell have you done?" he barked. I didn't even stand. "Good afternoon, Dad." He slammed a folder onto my desk. This is what I'm talking about." The folder contained the trust notification letters sent to all Carson property tenants. my name printed neatly under authorized signature. I met his glare with calm. Everything you're holding is legal. Grandma's instructions went into effect the moment I turned 30. She didn't mean for you to take everything away from me. She meant for the trust to be protected, I said quietly. You were bleeding it dry. Bleeding it dry, he repeated, incredulous. I built this family, Emily. I expanded every property your grandmother left. I took risks. Yes, I said, and you lost half of them. I turned my screen toward him, rows of red numbers showing failed ventures and drained accounts. She trusted you, Dad, and you treated her legacy like your sandbox. He stared at the data, his anger flickering into something else, fear maybe. You don't understand what it takes to keep this family together. I understand more than you think, I said. I've been cleaning up after your decision since college. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. You think this makes you powerful? It makes you alone. I met his eyes. Maybe. But at least I'll be honest about how I got here. For a long time, he didn't move. Then he reached into his pocket, pulled out a small folded piece of paper, and dropped it on my desk. You may have the paperwork, Emily, but you'll never have this family. He left before I could answer. I unfolded the paper. It was an old family photo, Christmas Eve 10 years ago. Ryan and I were smiling in front of the tree, Dad's arm around Mom, Grandma Mary, in her favorite blue sweater. I ran my thumb over Grandma's face. Her eyes looked straight at me, kind but knowing. She knew this day would come, I whispered. That night I stayed at the office long after dark. The city hummed outside, endless and indifferent. I thought about Dad's words, "You'll never have this family," and realized he was half right. I didn't want the family he'd built on guilt and debt. I wanted the one Grandma believed could still exist, the one with integrity instead of entitlement. Before I left, I printed the trust summary and pinned it to my bulletin board. At the top, I wrote a single sentence in black marker, "Justice isn't revenge. It's reclamation." Then under it, Phase 2 notification complete. Prepare for confrontation. The war had officially begun. The invitation came 3 days later, written in Mom's careful cursive family dinner. Sunday at 6. Let's talk this through. It wasn't a request, it was a summons. I knew exactly what it meant. My father wasn't done fighting. By the time I pulled up to the old Carson house, the driveway was already full, Ryan's new hybrid parked crookedly. Mom's sedan tucked neatly beside Dad's truck. The front porch glowed with warm light, but the moment I stepped through the door, the air felt tight, rehearsed. Mom met me first, wringing her hands in her apron. "Emily," she said softly, "thank you for coming." Did I have a choice? Her smile faltered. "Please just try to stay calm. Your father, he wants to clear the air." Clear the air. Right. The dining table was set like it always was on holidays. Candles, linen napkins, her famous baked apple pie cooling on the counter. It would have felt nostalgic if not for the tension buzzing under the surface. Dad sat at the head of the table, a glass of red wine untouched beside his plate. Ryan sat across from him, looking anywhere but at me. I took the seat furthest from Dad, setting my phone face down beside my fork. For a few minutes we ate in silence. Forks clinked, the clock ticked, and the air thickened. Finally, Dad cleared his throat. So he said, voice measured, "I understand you've made some changes." I met his eyes. "I've enforced the trust as it was written. Nothing more." He smiled thinly. "You always were good at following rules, even when they don't make sense." "They make perfect sense," I said evenly. "Grandma built the trust to protect what she earned. You were spending from it like it was your personal account." Mom flinched, cutting in. "Let's not do this tonight. It's Christmas week. We should, no, let's," I said quietly. "If we're going to pretend to be a family, let's at least be honest one." Ryan shifted uncomfortably. "Dad didn't mean to do anything wrong. He just, what I asked." "Forgot that other people's work doesn't belong to him, Emily," Mom said sharply. "Cuz." Dad leaned back, exhaling through his nose. "You sound just like her, you know that. Your grandmother. always preaching responsibility while ignoring reality. She was the only one who ever faced reality, I said. You built your empire on her money and called it vision. His jaw twitched. You have no idea what I've sacrificed for this family. I have a pretty good idea, I said. I'm the one cleaning up the financial wreckage you left behind. That did it. He slammed his fork down, the clang echoing through the room. You're not cleaning up anything. You're dismantling everything I built. What did you build? I laughed under my breath. Dad, the Carson name exists because of Grandma. She bought those properties. She created that portfolio. You just inherited the keys. His face reddened. And you think you can handle all of this better than me? You think some fancy spreadsheets make you smarter than the man who raised you? I didn't flinch. Yes. When the man who raised me doesn't know how to read a trust clause, yes. Ryan muttered something under his breath. God, you're both impossible. I turned to him. You're awfully quiet for someone who's been benefiting from the same money I'm trying to protect. That's not fair, he said. Dad helped me because he believes in me. He bailed you out because he can't face failure. Yours or his. Ryan pushed back his chair. I'm done with this. Sit down, Dad ordered. His tone made everyone freeze. Ryan hesitated, then sat. Dad turned to me again, voice low, deliberate. I'll tell you what's going to happen, Emily. You're going to reverse this nonsense. You're going to call that lawyer of yours and tell him I remain in control of the trust. No. His eyes hardened. You don't want to do this. I already did. He laughed bitterly. Then you leave me no choice. He reached under the table and pulled out a document, thick, official stamped. He didn't just file a challenge. He listed Carson Construction's primary assets, the ones tied to trust collateral, as potential defense funds, a clear violation of Clause 14B. Undue influence. He was violating the very document he claimed to protect. I stared at the papers. Undue influence. Are you implying Grandma was manipulated? She was old, he said simply. And you were always her favorite. Mom whispered, Frank, don't. He ignored her. The court will see reason. They'll see you as an opportunist. For a long moment, I said nothing. The candles flickered, and outside the wind howled against the windows. Then I stood up, sliding my chair back slowly. You really don't get it, do you? I said. This isn't about winning. It's about keeping what's left of our name intact. And you're destroying it one desperate move at a time. He stood too looming over the table. Don't lecture me about the family name. You're the one tearing it apart. Grandma predicted you'd say that, I said softly. She wrote it in her letter. That stopped him cold. What letter? The one she left for me on my 30th birthday, I said. She knew you'd accuse me of betrayal. She told me not to let guilt stop me from doing what's right. His mouth opened, then closed. I reached into my bag and pulled out a copy of the trust summary, sliding it across the table. Read it, Dad. Page 12. Grandma's signature. It's not my handwriting. It's hers. He didn't look at it. Frank, Mom said softly. Maybe we should. He cut her off. You think I'm scared of a piece of paper? You're not winning this, Emily. You've made a powerful enemy. I gave a slight smile. You were never my enemy, Dad. But you made yourself one the moment you gave my home away like a Christmas toy. Silence fell. Even Ryan didn't move. I picked up my coat and keys, heading for the door. Dinner was lovely, Mom, I said. I'll let the court decide the rest. Emily. She started, but I was already gone. The cold air hit my face like a slap as I stepped outside. Snow had begun to fall again, thick and silent. I stood at the edge of the driveway, watching the warm light spill from the windows. Somewhere inside, my father was still pacing, still plotting. But for the first time, I didn't feel small. I felt steady. As I got into my car, I checked my phone. A new email from Hines blinked on the screen, preliminary audit complete. Preliminary results suggest misuse of trust funds exceeding $2.4 million. Recommend immediate freeze on secondary accounts. I read it twice, then smiled. Cold, slow, certain. Dad wanted a war. He was about to get one. I didn't sleep that night. I kept replaying every word from dinner Dad's fury, Ryan's cowardice, Mom's silence, but mostly I heard Grandma's voice, soft, deliberate, the way she'd speak when she wanted you to understand something that wasn't easy to hear. Just before dawn, I opened the small oak box she'd left me. I'd kept it sealed for years, marked to be opened on your 30th birthday. Inside, under a folded handkerchief that still smelled faintly of lavender, lay a single envelope. My name is written in her elegant script. I broke the seal carefully. My dearest Emily, if you're reading this, then the trust has passed to you as it was meant to. By now, your father has likely made this more difficult than it should be. He loves fiercely, but his pride blinds him. Do not let it blind you too. This wealth is not a prize. It's a responsibility. You must protect it not from strangers, but from the ones who would waste it out of fear, vanity, or guilt. I paused, swallowing hard. It was like she was in the room with me. You will be accused of greed. You will be told you are tearing the family apart. You must stand firm. The truth is, the family began tearing long before your generation. You are not causing the break. You are repairing it. And when the time comes, because it will remind your father that this trust was never meant to divide us. It was meant to save us from ourselves. I folded the letter back into its envelope, heart thudding. Grandma had known every piece of this would happen. The phone rang. It was Heinz. I assume you've read the audit report, he said without preamble. I have. Then you understand the gravity. Your father withdrew nearly $2.5 million in unapproved transfers over the past 8 years. That's breach of fiduciary duty under state law. My throat tightened. What happens next? You can file a formal claim. If you do, the court will open an investigation. But Emily, he hesitated. Once you take that step, there's no going back. It became a public record. Everyone will know what he did. I looked at the letter again. Protect it from the ones who would waste it out of vanity or guilt. I'll file, I said. Do it today. He sighed. I thought you might say that. After we hung up, I sat there for a long time, the silence of my apartment pressing in. Filing meant exposing him not just as a father who'd been unfair, but as a man who'd betrayed his own mother's legacy. But the choice had already been made. By noon, Heinz sent confirmation that the filing was complete. A civil petition, Carson Family Trust. Frank Carson. An hour later, my phone started buzzing. First Ryan, then Mom, then an unknown number, reporters probably. I ignored all of them until finally one message appeared that made me freeze. It was from Dad. Meet me. Carson Construction Office. Now. When I arrived, his office door was wide open. Papers were scattered across the desk as though a storm had torn through. He stood by the window, staring out at the skyline he used to brag about owning. So it's true, he said, not turning. You filed against me. I didn't have a choice. He turned slowly, his face pale but hard. There's always a choice. You took money that wasn't yours, Dad. I built that money, he snapped. You think those properties manage themselves? You think your grandmother just handed me success on a silver platter? I worked, Emily. And she worked harder, I said. You just forgot what for. He moved closer, lowering his voice. You're going to regret this. You're humiliating me. Your own father. I met his stare. You humiliated yourself the day you handed my home to Ryan like it was a party favor. He laughed bitterly. That's what this is about, isn't it? The apartment? You can dress it up as responsibility all you want, but this is revenge. Maybe it started that way, I admitted. But now it's about something bigger. You broke Grandma's rules. I'm making sure she's heard. He shook his head, almost pitying. You sound just like her. Always lecturing. Always acting like you're the only adult in the room. She was the only adult in the room, I said quietly. For a moment, something in his expression cracked. He turned away, staring again at the window. You think you're saving the family. But you're killing it. No, I said. I'm just letting the truth breathe. He slammed the glass down hard enough to crack the wood, sending a spray of whiskey across the documents. You have no idea what it's like to be me." I left before he could answer. Outside, the wind had picked up. The streetlights glowed through thin flurries of snow. I stood for a moment on the steps of the building that bore his name, Carson Construction Group, and thought of Grandma's letter again. She'd known this would hurt. She'd known it would isolate me. But she'd trusted me to carry it through anyway. When I got home, I called Mom. She answered on the second ring. "Please tell me this isn't true," she said, voice trembling. "It's true." The audit confirmed it. "He's furious, Emily. He's saying you've destroyed everything." "I didn't destroy anything," I said. "I just stopped pretending it wasn't already broken." Mom went quiet. Then she whispered, "He's scared. He's never been scared before. Maybe it's time he was." There was a pause. Then softly, "Your grandmother would be proud." After we hung up, I went back to the letter. At the bottom, in faint handwriting, Grandma had added one last note. "P.S. The house at Harbor Street isn't what it seems. Check the deed. You'll understand when you do. Harbor Street, my apartment." I grabbed my laptop, heart racing, and logged into the county record system. The deed loaded after a few seconds, and there it was, a notation buried in the legal description: parcel registered under Carson Family Trust Subdivision D, Corporate Cluster Ownership. Corporate Cluster. I followed the link, scrolling through the subfiles, one address after another. 12 properties total. 12. My apartment wasn't a single unit. It was part of an entire block. A block owned by the trust. A block that now belonged to me. I stared at the screen, pulse thundering. Dad hadn't just tried to evict me from my home. He'd tried to take a piece of my grandmother's empire. And in doing so, he'd handed me the proof that I owned something much bigger than he ever imagined. The house at Harbor Street wasn't just mine. The neighborhood was. It was nearly midnight when I drove back to Harbor Street, my mind still reeling from the documents I'd just uncovered. The neighborhood was quiet rows of old brick buildings, softened by a layer of new snow. Streetlights flickered over the curved iron fences, the same ones I used to run my fingers along as a child when Grandma brought me here to see where it all began. Now I finally understood what she'd meant. I parked in front of my building and stepped out into the cold air. The block stretched ahead like a secret familiar and foreign, all at once. 12 properties. My grandmother's hidden empire. Inside my old apartment, the air smelled faintly of cinnamon and old pine remnants from the Christmas candles I'd left behind. I stood in the middle of the empty living room where Dad had humiliated me only days earlier. He'd handed Ryan my keys right here in front of everyone. And yet, this wasn't just my apartment. It was the cornerstone of the entire district. I opened my laptop at the kitchen counter and began tracing the property files. Each address connected to another through the Carson Trust Subdivision D, the bakery on the corner, the row of restored townhomes, even the parking lot behind the hardware store. Every deed led back to one name: Carson Family Trust Primary Trustee Emily Carson. I whispered it out loud, testing the weight of it. Mine. My phone buzzed Hines again. "I know it's late," he said, "but I think you need to see this. There's a subclause in the trust about Subdivision D." "What kind of subclause?" "One that's unusually specific. It authorizes the trustee you to manage, sell, or lease those 12 properties independently from the rest of the estate. Essentially, Emily, it's your sandbox. You have full control." My pulse quickened. "You're saying I can do whatever I want with them, legally?" "Yes. Your grandmother must have separated them for a reason." I closed my eyes, remembering her voice from years ago. "Some foundations need a strong keeper. Someday that'll be you." "Thank you, Hines," I said softly. After we hung up, I stood at the window, staring out over the snow-covered rooftops. My grandmother hadn't just left me property. She'd left me a test, a chance to prove I could build, not just inherit. By morning, I knew what I was going to do. The next day, I called the property manager listed in the files, a man named Harris. "I need updated tenant reports for all Harbor Street units," I said. There was a pause. "Of course, Ms. Carson. You're the new trustee, correct?" "Yes. Effective immediately. He cleared his throat. Then I should tell you your father's been using the properties for his own purposes. Short-term leases, cash rentals, even off-the-books tenants. It's been messy. I felt a flicker of anger. How messy? Let's just say it's going to take some untangling. But we'll handle it. No, I said. I'll handle it. I spent the entire day walking the neighborhood, notebook in hand, taking pictures of every building. The bakery owner, Mrs. Dalton, recognized me immediately. Emily, I haven't seen you since you were in pigtails. I used to bake you lemon squares. I smiled faintly. You're still here. She wiped her hands on her apron. Barely. Your father raised the rent last year. I've been worried I'd lose this place. I blinked. He raised your rent? By 20%, she said. Said it was to keep up with market rates. Market rates. For a 70-year-old woman selling bread and kindness. I wrote something in my notebook. That's going to change. As I made my way down the block, tenant after tenant told the same story. Quiet frustration, sudden rent hikes, unannounced repairs that never happened. My father had treated the neighborhood like a forgotten investment, not a community. But to Grandma, this place had meant everything. That night I called Hines again. I want to restructure Subdivision D, I told him. Not sell it. Revive it. You're serious? Completely. Grandma didn't build this to become another overpriced district. I'm turning it into something sustainable, affordable housing for local families and small businesses. A living legacy. He hesitated. That's going to ruffle feathers, Emily. Especially your father's. I'm counting on it. By the next morning, I had a new plan. I reached out to a nonprofit development group I'd once consulted for during my early career. They specialized in urban renewal projects, turning forgotten properties into vibrant, affordable communities. When I explained who I was and what I wanted to do, their director paused. Wait, you're that Carson the Harbor Street portfolio. Yes, I said, and I want to make it right. He laughed softly. This is going to make headlines. Good, I said. Let it. Within 48 hours, I had architects reviewing plans, legal drafts in motion, and a press release ready to go. I could already imagine my father's reaction when the news hit his daughter, the one he'd evicted, turning his neglected properties into a social impact project. That evening, as the city lights shimmered against the harbor, I stood on the sidewalk outside my building. The air smelled faintly of sea salt and snow. Across the street, kids were throwing snowballs, their laughter echoing between brick walls. This was the neighborhood my grandmother loved. This was what she'd wanted me to see. I pulled out my phone and snapped a photo of the block, sending it to Hines with a single message, Phase 3, the Harbor Street Project. Almost immediately he replied, Your grandmother would be proud. I smiled a slow, deliberate smile. Yeah, I whispered, but Dad's gonna hate it. As I turned to head back inside, I caught a glimpse of headlights at the corner. A familiar black SUV. Dad. He rolled down the window, face shadowed but furious. You think you can take this from me? He said through clenched teeth. I met his glare calmly. I didn't take anything, Dad. You gave it away. I'm just rebuilding what you broke. He leaned closer, eyes burning. You don't know what you're doing. Actually, I said softly, for the first time, I think I do. He stared at me for a long moment, then drove off, tires crunching over the snow. I watched the taillights fade into the dark, then turned back to the quiet street that now belonged to me not as property, but as purpose. Grandma's voice echoed in my head, clear and steady. Some foundations need a strong keeper. I whispered back, Don't worry. I've got this. And for the first time since Christmas night, I believed it. The headline hit before sunrise. Heiress turns father's real estate empire into affordable housing project. It was splashed across local news feeds, business journals, and even a few national outlets. My name, Emily Carson, was everywhere. I hadn't even made my morning coffee before the first call came in. Emily, it's Hines, he said, his voice tight. It's gone viral. Your father's office has already issued a statement. Let me guess, I said. He's calling me ungrateful, worse. He's accusing you of reckless interference in family business operations. I took a deep breath. So exactly what I expected. The calls came fast, reporters, investors, and critics. My inbox is filled with interview requests. By 9 a.m., Dad called. "Emily," he said through clenched teeth. "What the hell did you just do?" "Fix your legacy," I said. "You turned a multi-million-dollar portfolio into a charity project. Do you have any idea how that looks?" "Like redemption," I said simply. "Something you should have thought about years ago. You're playing with fire." "No, Dad," I said quietly. "You did. I'm just the one putting it out." He hung up without another word. By noon, I was sitting in a conference room downtown with representatives from the nonprofit group. Plans for the Harbor Street project were spread across the table: new layouts for renovated apartments, small business grants for the bakery and corner shop, community gardens, childcare centers. It was exactly the kind of transformation Grandma would have wanted. Still, part of me couldn't ignore the knot forming in my stomach. I wasn't just fighting my father anymore. I was defying an entire system he'd built and the people who had profited from it. Across the table, the nonprofit director, Maya, studied me carefully. "You sure you're ready for this kind of spotlight? It's not just about money anymore. This story has teeth." "I'm ready," I said. "This isn't about proving I'm right. It's about proving Grandma was." She nodded slowly. "Then let's build something worth her name." That afternoon, we held the first press briefing in one of the vacant buildings. The air was crisp, the crowd small but buzzing. Cameras flashed, microphones thrust forward. I stood at the podium, hands steady despite the whirlwind of noise. My grandmother, Mary Carson, believed real estate isn't just about profit, it's about people I began. Harbor Street was her first investment. It's where our family story began. Today it becomes a new story, one rooted in community opportunity and accountability. A reporter shouted, "What does your father think of this?" I gave a faint smile. "You'll have to ask him. But I can tell you this: Mary Carson's legacy doesn't belong to one person. It belongs to everyone who believed in what she built." The room erupted in questions, flashes, voices overlapping. I answered what I could, dodged what I had to. And when it was over, I stood alone for a moment in the quiet afterward, staring at the banner we'd hung behind the podium: the Harbor Street Project, Rebuilding Legacy, Restoring Trust. When I stepped outside, Maya was waiting with 2 cups of coffee. "You handled that like a pro," she said. I handled it like someone who's been cornered before I replied. "Your father's already on the phone with city officials," she warned. "He's threatening to block zoning approvals." "Let him try," I said. "Every property here is under my name now. He can't touch it." "Maybe not legally," she said, "but power doesn't always play by the rules." That night my fears came true. I returned home to find a thick envelope slid under my door. Inside were photos: me at the press event, me walking to my car, me standing outside my apartment. A note scrawled in sharp ink read, "You're making enemies you don't understand. Stop before someone gets hurt." My heart pounded as I reread the message. It wasn't signed, but I didn't need a name. I knew exactly where it came from. I called Hines immediately. "They're trying to intimidate me." "Emily." "Listen to me," he said. "Don't react emotionally. This isn't just your father anymore. Some of his business partners have serious money tied up in those holdings. You're threatening their bottom line. So what do? You keep your head down, follow the law, stay visible. They can't attack you in the dark if the world's watching." That advice echoed in my mind all night. Stay visible. The next morning I doubled down. I scheduled a second press interview, this time with the Seattle Tribune. If they wanted to scare me into silence, I'd do the opposite. The interview ran 2 days later with the headline, "The Heiress Who Fought Back." It wasn't perfect, some parts sensationalized, some misquoted, but the core message was clear: a woman standing up to a patriarch's corruption. The comment section exploded. People were furious, inspired, divided. But they were talking. That night, as I sat on my couch, surrounded by open files and takeout containers, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "You think the cameras will protect you? They won't." I froze. Then another message followed. "We warned you. Stay out of Harbor Street." I stared at the screen until the messages disappeared, replaced by a sickening quiet. For the first time, I felt real fear, not the professional kind, not the "what will people think" kind. This was different. This was dangerous. I called Maya. "We need security at the project site," I said. "Starting tomorrow." She didn't ask questions. Already done. When I finally went to bed, exhaustion weighed heavy on me. But underneath it, something sharper burned resolve. They could threaten me. They could smear me. They could even try to scare me off my own street. But Harbor Street wasn't just real estate anymore. It was a battlefield. And I was done being pushed out of what was mine. Outside light flakes drifted through the streetlights, blanketing the sidewalks in white silence. For a brief moment, I thought of Grandma standing here years ago, watching her first tenants move in, smiling that quiet smile she always wore when she knew something others didn't. I whispered into the darkness, "I won't stop. Not this time." And somewhere deep inside, I swear I heard her voice again, soft, steady, unshaken. "Good. Now let them see what Carson really is." The knock came early, sharp, and deliberate. I hadn't even finished my first sip of stale coffee when I opened the door to find two men in tailored suits holding thick envelopes. "Mez." Carson, one of them asked. "Yes." He handed me the envelope. "You've been served." The door clicked shut behind me as I stared at the heavy paper in my hands. I didn't need to open it to know what it was. My father's retaliation had arrived. Inside the words, screamed in bold print, notice of civil claim, breach of fiduciary duty, and misappropriation of assets. He was sued me. I sat at the kitchen counter reading every line with slow shaking hands. He was accusing me, the trustee, of illegally seizing the family's assets and defaming his reputation through the Harbor Street project. Attached were screenshots of news articles, my press interviews, even the nonprofit's promotional material. He was trying to turn my victory into a scandal. When I called Hines, he didn't sound surprised. "I expected this," he said. "Frank's trying to build a narrative that you abused your power, that you're using the trust for personal gain. It's desperate, but dangerous. So what do? We fight back. But carefully. You can't let emotion drive this. The documents are on your side, Emily. You're the legal trustee. Every move you've made has been within your authority." I pinched the bridge of my nose, exhaustion pressing behind my eyes. "He's not just coming after me professionally, Hines. He's trying to ruin me publicly. That's exactly what bullies do when they lose control," he said. "Stay steady. This isn't the time to blink." After I hung up, I went to the window. The city was waking up, construction cranes moving in the distance, trucks humming through the streets, the cold sunlight bouncing off the skyline my father once ruled. I thought of Grandma again. She'd lived her life preparing for storms like this. Maybe in some strange way she'd been preparing me too. By mid-morning, the Harbor Street project office was buzzing with activity. Maya greeted me at the door, holding her phone like a shield. Ryan had gone silent for weeks, avoiding the spotlight, which told me he knew exactly how bad Dad's position truly was. "Don't panic," she said immediately, which of course made me panic. "The lawsuit's all over the news. But listen, people are rallying around you. The tenants, the community, everyone's furious that he's trying to stop this. Let them talk," I said. "We'll respond legally, not emotionally." "Already on it," she said. "But you might want to see this." She handed me her tablet. On the screen was a leaked copy of an internal Carson construction memo. My father had sent it to his investors that morning. Effective immediately, all partnership contracts with the Harbor Street project are considered unauthorized and non-binding. Carson Construction will pursue full damages. I scrolled further and froze. He had also listed every current Harbor Street tenant as at risk due to impending litigation. He wasn't just coming after me. He was threatening the people I was trying to protect. I called him right then. He answered on the second ring, voice cool and smug. "Good morning, Emily." "What the hell are you doing, exercising my rights?" he said simply. "You want to play businesswoman? Fine. Let's play. You've tied my name to a vanity project that endangers my company's stability. I'm protecting my shareholders." "You're weaponizing fear," I snapped. "These tenants are real people, not balance sheet liabilities." "They're collateral," he said coldly. "You made that choice when you dragged this family through the mud." My voice trembled with fury. "You're crossing a line, Dad." He laughed softly. "You drew it first." When he hung up, I stood there for a long time staring at the phone in my hand. Then I looked at Maya. "We're not backing down." She nodded. "Then we make this bigger." That afternoon, we called an emergency press conference. The community center was packed, reporters, residents, volunteers, all hungry for answers. I stood at the front, every light and camera fixed on me. "I've been accused of misusing the Carson Trust," I said, voice steady. "But here's the truth. This project is what the trust was designed for, to serve families, not egos. My father believes legacy is measured in square footage. I believe it's measured in lives changed." The applause started small, then grew until it filled the entire room. When the noise died down, I added, "To every tenant who received an eviction warning this morning, you're safe. I've personally frozen all lease changes under my authority as trustee. No one is losing their home." Flashes erupted as reporters shouted questions, but I didn't flinch. I'd stopped running from the spotlight. Now I am using it. After the conference, Maya pulled me aside. "You realize this means war, right?" "It already is," I said, "and I'm done fighting in the dark." That night I met Hines at his office to review the countersuit. He looked tired but determined. "You've got leverage now," he said. "Public sentiment's shifting. And here's the kicker. Remember those side contracts your father's company signed with developers using trust funds? They're illegal under the trust's restrictions. If we expose that, he'll lose everything." "Expose it," I said without hesitation. He nodded. "It's bold, but it's the right move." As I left his office, my phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't a threat. It was a message from an unknown number with a photo attached. It was my father standing outside one of the Harbor Street buildings surrounded by reporters. The caption beneath it from a local journalist read, "Frank Carson responds to daughter's defiance. She'll regret crossing me." I stared at the image, the cold in his eyes even sharper than the winter air around him. But behind him, I noticed something he didn't miss. Dalton, the bakery owner, standing at the corner of the crowd, holding a handmade sign that read, "We stand with Emily." By the next morning, her photo was everywhere. Dozens of tenants joined her holding signs, giving interviews, sharing their stories of rent hikes and mistreatment. The tide was turning. I watched it unfold on TV, barely believing it. My father had power, yes, but I had people. And for the first time, I realized his empire wasn't crumbling because of me. It was crumbling because of him. As the sun set over the harbor, I stood by the window of my apartment, the one he'd tried to take, and whispered, "You taught me to fight, Dad. You just didn't expect me to win." Somewhere in the distance, sirens wailed, blending with the wind and the city's heartbeat. The war wasn't over. But the momentum had shifted. And this time, I wasn't fighting to take something back. I was fighting to build something better. By the time the first snow of February settled over the harbor, my father's name had become a headline for all the wrong reasons. The lawsuit he'd filed against me had backfired spectacularly. His financial records, once sealed behind layers of corporate secrecy, were now public through court discovery. Every misuse of trust funds, every shady deal with developers, every under-the-table payment, it was all there. The media called it the fall of the patriarch. I called it truth, finally breathing. I was sitting in my office papers scattered across my desk when Hines walked in holding a folder thicker than usual. "It's done," he said simply. "The court granted your motion to freeze all of Frank's personal and corporate accounts linked to the trust." I looked up. "All of them," he nodded. "Every last one. He can't touch a dime until this case is resolved." For a long moment, I didn't say anything. I'd wanted this victory for months, but now that it was real, it didn't feel like triumph. It felt heavy like justice that came too late to feel good. Emily Hines said gently, "This was inevitable. He did this to himself." "I know," I whispered. "But he's still my father." That evening I drove to the construction company's headquarters. The building looked darker than usual, half the lights off the Carson logo dim against the winter sky. Inside, the staff avoided my eyes. Whispers followed me through the hallways like ghosts. His office door was open. He sat behind his desk, tie loosened face, pale, a bottle of bourbon half empty beside him. For the first time in my life, Frank Carson looked small. So he said, without looking up, "You've won." This wasn't about winning. He laughed bitterly. "Of course it was. You just don't have the guts to say it." "You sued me," I said evenly. "You weaponized everything Grandma built, everything I've spent my life trying to protect." "What did you think would happen?" He looked up at me, then eyes bloodshot but sharp. "I thought you'd back down. That you'd remember who raised you." "I remember," I said quietly. "I also remember who made me pay rent for the apartment I bought with my own money." He poured himself another drink, hands shaking slightly. "You think you're better than me?" "No," I said. "I think I'm just finally done being scared of you." For a long time we said nothing. The only sound was the wind against the glass and the faint hum of the building's heating system. Finally he muttered, "You've ruined me, Emily. You've humiliated me in front of the entire city." I stepped closer. "You did that to yourself. You just thought no one would ever hold you accountable." He scoffed. "Accountable for what? For trying to build something bigger than your grandmother's little dream. She built something that lasted," I said. "You built something that collapsed the second it wasn't about you anymore." He slammed the glass down hard enough to crack the wood, sending a spray of whiskey across the documents. "You have no idea what it's like to be me." I didn't flinch. "You're right, I don't. And I don't want to." His shoulders slumped. For a moment he looked older than I'd ever seen him. "Do you have any idea what they'll say about me now?" "They'll say you built an empire," I said softly, "and your daughter learned how to rebuild it without destroying everyone in the process." He stared at me, and something in his expression shifted, anger fading into something closer to regret. "You really believe you're saving this family, don't you?" "I'm trying to," I said, "but I can't do that while you're still burning the foundation." He turned his chair toward the window, staring out at the city. "They're already pulling contracts," he murmured. "Suppliers, investors, they're all gone. 30 years gone in a week." I wanted to feel satisfaction, but all I felt was a dull ache. "Dad." "Don't," he said sharply. "Don't pity me. I made choices, and I'll live with them. Just know this: one day when you're standing where I stood, you'll understand what it costs to carry a family name." He looked back at me, then eyes glassy. "Go ahead, Emily. Take it all. The company, the buildings, the damned legacy. See if it keeps you warm when you realize there's nothing left but walls and guilt." I walked to the door, then paused. "You're wrong," I said. "There's more left than that. You just stopped seeing it." As I left the building, reporters were already gathered outside, their questions slicing through the cold air. "Ms. Carson, any comment on your father's financial collapse? Are you taking control of Carson Construction? Is this revenge?" I stopped at the steps, looked into the nearest camera, and said, "This isn't revenge. This is restoration. The Carson legacy belongs to everyone who believed in doing the right thing, even when it hurt." The footage aired that night on every major station. By morning, the fallout was complete. Carson Construction filed for bankruptcy. My father's assets were frozen pending investigation. Ryan predictably vanished from the public eye. And my phone didn't stop ringing, not from reporters this time, but from lawyers, city officials, even former employees thanking me for exposing what they'd been afraid to speak about for years. But not all the calls were easy. When Mom finally reached out, her voice trembled through the phone. "He's not doing well," she said. "He hasn't left the house in days." "I know," I said quietly. "Emily, maybe you should go see him, before this becomes something neither of you can undo." For a long moment I didn't answer. Then I whispered, maybe. That night I stood at my window looking out over Harbor Street, the street I'd fought so hard to protect. Light flakes drifted through the streetlights, soft and relentless. Below, I saw Mrs. Dalton closing her bakery, waving at the children still playing outside. This was what Grandma wanted. Not profit, not power. Peace. I turned off the lights and sat in the dark for a long while, thinking of the man who'd built and broken everything I came from. Tomorrow I'd go see him. Not as an enemy, not as a victor, just as a daughter who finally understood that sometimes the hardest part of justice is mercy. The house looked smaller than I remembered. For years, Carson Manor had stood like a symbol of power, polished wood tall windows, the manicured lawn that screamed success. But now, standing in front of it with snow collecting on my coat, it looked tired. The porch light flickered. The curtains were half drawn. The silence around it was heavy, the kind that made you feel the weight of everything left unsaid. I took a deep breath and climbed the steps. My hand hesitated over the doorbell before I finally pressed it. It took almost a full minute before I heard movement inside, slow footsteps, then the faint creak of the latch. The door opened, and there he was. My father looked nothing like the man who'd once commanded boardrooms and press conferences. His hair was unkempt, his face gaunt, eyes dull with exhaustion. He wore a sweater I hadn't seen since I was a kid, the gray one Mom used to patch at the elbows. He stared at me for a long moment before muttering, "Didn't think you'd actually come." "I said I might," I answered softly. Mom called. He stepped aside without a word, letting me in. The house smelled faintly of dust and whiskey. Boxes were stacked near the fireplace. Papers littered the coffee table, and the once grand living room felt like a monument to decline. "Packing?" I asked. He grunted. "Selling. Don't need all this space." I followed him into the kitchen. He poured cold coffee into 2 mismatched mugs and handed me one. His hands trembled slightly, but his voice was steady when he finally said, "So what now, Emily? You come to see the aftermath of your little crusade?" I set the cup down carefully. "I came because Mom asked me to, and because I needed to." He let out a low, humorless laugh. "Needed to what?" "Feel sorry for me." "Don't bother. I've already done that myself." "I didn't come here for pity," I said. "I came here for closure." He sank into a chair, rubbing his temples. "You think you've won? You and that charity project of yours. But you've destroyed everything this family built." I met his eyes. "No, Dad. I saved what was left of it." He slammed his hand against the table. "Saved it. You humiliated me in front of the entire city. You dragged our name through the dirt. Our name was already in the dirt," I said quietly. "You just didn't want to see it." The silence stretched between us, sharp and heavy. He leaned back, staring at the ceiling. "You have no idea what it took to build this. The deals I made, the people I had to outmaneuver. You think money just appeared because I wanted it? I think you forgot why Grandma built it in the first place," I said. "It wasn't about the money. It was about community. Legacy. You turned it into a monument to yourself." His jaw tightened. "She always favored you, you know. Even as a kid. Said you had her eyes." I blinked. "She said the same thing to me." He gave a bitter smile. "Of course she did." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The clock on the wall ticked too loudly. Somewhere upstairs, the house groaned, settling under the weight of its own silence. Finally, he asked, "What happens to me now? Do I just fade out while you play savior?" "I don't want you to fade out," I said. "I just want you to stop fighting ghosts. The company's gone, but that doesn't mean you are." He stared into his coffee. "Do you really think anyone will hire a disgraced developer in his 60s? You're not powerless, Dad. You're just not in control anymore. There's a difference." He gave a long, shaky sigh. "Your mother says you've turned that Harbor Street mess into something real." "It's not a mess," I said. "We've opened 2 new buildings. Local families are moving in next month. Small businesses are coming back. We even started a community mentorship program." He looked up slowly, studying my face. "And all that comes from my money." I nodded. "From the trust. From Grandma's vision. and from me managing it the way it was meant to be managed. He leaned back, defeated but curious. You really believe this will last? I know it will. Because it's built on integrity, not image. He gave a hollow chuckle. Sounds like something your grandmother would have said. For the first time that evening, his tone wasn't laced with anger, just tiredness. We sat there for a while, the two of us surrounded by years of resentment and silence. Then, almost imperceptibly, his expression softened. You remind me of her, he said. Stubborn, idealistic, always thinking you're right. She usually was, I said with a faint smile. He actually laughed quietly but real. It was the first time I'd heard it in years. After a moment, he said, You know, I thought giving Ryan the apartment would fix things, prove I was still the father in control. I didn't realize I was pushing you out of something you built. I nodded. That was the day everything changed. He rubbed his forehead. And I kept doubling down. I didn't even stop to ask why you were fighting so hard. I just wanted to win. That's all you ever wanted, I said softly. Winning. He sighed again, his voice cracking just slightly. And what did it get me? An empty house and a daughter I don't know how to talk to. That one hit harder than I expected. I swallowed, forcing down the lump in my throat. You could start by not treating me like the enemy, I said. I never wanted to destroy you, Dad. I just couldn't let you destroy me. He looked at me for a long time, then nodded slowly, almost imperceptibly. Maybe it's time I stopped pretending I'm still the man I was. I stood glancing around the room one last time. You don't have to be that man anymore. You can be something better. At the door, I paused. We're having a community dinner next week on Harbor Street. You should come. He didn't answer right away. Finally, he said, If I show up, it'll make headlines again. Then let them write about something good for once, I said. They might even call it redemption. I stepped out into the cold. The snow had thickened, covering the street in white. As I walked toward my car, I turned back. He was still standing in the doorway, framed by the light behind him. For the first time, he didn't look like a fallen king. He just looked like a man realizing it wasn't too late to start over. When I got home that night, I sat at my desk and opened Grandma's last letter again. I'd read it so many times the paper had softened at the folds. Forgiveness isn't weakness, Emily. It's how strong people let the light back in. I traced the words with my fingers, and for the first time in months I let myself cry not from anger, not from loss, but from the fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, we weren't broken beyond repair. Outside, the snow kept falling, blanketing the city in quiet absolution. And somewhere in the distance, I thought I heard the faint hum of construction, the sound of something new rising from the ruins. The scent of apple pie filled the air, warm and sweet, floating above the low hum of conversation and laughter. String lights crisscrossed the courtyard between the newly restored Harbor Street buildings, and long wooden tables were lined with dishes brought by tenants and volunteers. It wasn't a gala or a press event. It wasn't a victory parade. It was something quieter, something better, community. I moved between the tables, greeting families I'd come to know by name. Mrs. Dalton waved me over from the dessert table. You better get a slice before it's gone, she said, cutting into the golden crust. Your project turned this place around, Emily. You should be proud, I replied, smiling. It's not my project anymore, Mrs. Dalton. It's ours. The lights flickered briefly and children squealed with delight as snow began to drift down from the night sky. It felt like a scene from a different life, one where peace didn't have to be fought for so hard. At the far end of this courtyard, I saw him. My father stood near the entrance wearing his old wool coat, the one I hadn't seen since before the lawsuit. His posture was hesitant, almost fragile. People whispered as he walked in, some with sympathy, others with curiosity. But no one stopped him. For a moment I froze. Then I excused myself and made my way toward him. Didn't think you'd actually come, I said when I reached him. He managed a tight smile, one that didn't quite reach his eyes. Your mother convinced me. Said I needed to see what all the fuss was about. Did she also tell you there's pie? She might have mentioned it. For a beat we just stood there, surrounded by laughter and clinking dishes. Then quietly he said, "It's beautiful, Emily. What have you done here?" "Thank you." He looked around, hands in his coat pockets. "I never imagined Harbor Street like this. I used to drive past it every day and see nothing but numbers on a ledger. But this," he gestured to the crowd, "this is something real." "It's what Grandma wanted," I said, "and what I needed to prove to both of us." He nodded slowly. "You did more than prove it." We stood together in silence for a while, watching the children chase snowflakes under the lights. Then I saw Ryan across the courtyard holding 2 cups of hot cider. When he caught my eye, he hesitated before walking over. "Dad," he said cautiously. My father's expression hardened for a split second, then softened again. "Ryan." He handed him a cup. "I figured you might need this. It's freezing out here." For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Dad said quietly, "You doing all right, son?" Ryan nodded. "Better than I deserve." Dad's jaw worked, the words clearly difficult for him. "You were never the problem, Ryan." "I was." Ryan's eyes widened. "That's new." I couldn't help but smile faintly. "He's been learning humility," I said. Dad shot me a mock glare. "Don't push your luck." Ryan chuckled, the tension breaking just a little. "Well, for what it's worth, I'm glad you both found your way back." I looked between them, the father who'd once betrayed me, the brother who'd been used as a pawn, and for the first time, there was no bitterness, no scorekeeping, just an uneasy, genuine kind of peace. After a few minutes, Mom appeared, cheeks pink from the cold, carrying a tray of cider for the volunteers. "There you are," she said, handing Dad a mug. "Try not to freeze before dessert." He took it with a grin. "Yes, ma'am." She looked around the courtyard, her eyes shining. "This is wonderful, Emily. You've built something that actually matters." "It's not just me, Mom," I said. "It's everyone who refuses to give up." She reached out and squeezed my hand. "You didn't just rebuild a neighborhood. You rebuilt this family." Her voice cracked a little on the last word. I didn't correct her. As the evening went on, music began to play soft guitar chords from one of the residents' teenage sons. People danced between the tables, laughter echoing off the old brick walls. I watched Dad sitting with a few of the volunteers, listening to their stories, nodding in quiet humility. For the first time, he wasn't the man giving orders or chasing headlines. He was just part of something again. Later, I took the small stage at the center of the courtyard to thank everyone for coming. The chatter dimmed as I spoke. When I first came back to this neighborhood, I said it wasn't out of hope, it was out of pain. I thought I was fighting to save my inheritance, but it turns out I was fighting to save something much bigger. Our sense of belonging, our belief that family, community, and integrity still mean something in this world. Applause rippled through the crowd, warm and genuine. I continued, "We've all seen how power can divide, how greed can blind. But tonight proves something else. It can also heal. It can be built. It can give back. And that's what Harbor Street will keep doing." When I stepped down, Dad was waiting near the stage. He looked at me with an expression I hadn't seen since I was a child, one of pride, unguarded and real. "You did good, kid," he said quietly. "Better than I ever did. Maybe you just needed a different blueprint," I said. He smiled faintly. "Maybe I needed a better architect." The crowd started chanting for a toast, so I grabbed a glass of cider and raised it high. "To second chances," I said, looking directly at my father. He lifted his glass too. "And to learn when to listen." Everyone cheered. Glasses clinked. Somewhere in the distance, fireworks from another part of the city flared against the dark sky. As the celebration wound down, I walked alone for a moment through the row of renovated buildings. The brick walls still bore faint scars of age, but now they were wrapped in light and laughter. At the end of the street, the bakery sign glowed softly, "Dalton's Hearth Est, 2025. The smell of cinnamon lingered in the air. I turned back to watch my family huddled together near the fire pit and felt something deep in my chest loosen the years of resentment, the sharp edges of betrayal, all softening into something that almost felt like peace. Maybe we'd never go back to the way things were before that Christmas dinner. Maybe we weren't meant to. But tonight, under the falling snow and the glow of string lights, I realized we had built something stronger, something real. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was standing alone at the top of an empire. I felt like I was home. Spring came early that year. The air hummed with life vendors setting up stalls for the weekend market kids racing their bikes past murals that brightened the old brick walls. From my office window, I could see the sign hanging proudly on the nearest building, Harbor Street Foundation Building Futures. It still stunned me how far we'd come. A year ago, this street had been the symbol of everything my father's empire ignored. Now it was alive, families moving in, small businesses thriving, new apartments filling up faster than we could finish them. My assistant knocked on the door. "Emily, the city council's here for the walkthrough. Give me 5 minutes," I said, glancing at the framed newspaper article on the wall. It showed a photo from the night of the community dinner, me standing on the small wooden stage, a crowd of families behind me. The headline reading, "From Feud to Future, the Carson Legacy Restored." Below it was Grandma's old quote engraved on a plaque, "Legacy isn't what you own, it's what you build for others to stand on." I touched the metal lightly before heading out. The tour went smoothly. The mayor shook my hand. The city planner nodded approvingly, and the investors asked about expanding the model to other districts. But my favorite moment came when Mrs. Dalton interrupted politely to hand me a paper bag. "Still warm," she said with a wink. "Your favorite apple cinnamon." I laughed. "You're going to make me late for my meeting. Then you'll go smelling like success," she said, walking off. After the officials left, I stayed behind at the construction site. The new complex, 12 units designed for single parents, was almost finished. It had taken months of negotiations, zoning battles, and sleepless nights, but this was what it was all for. A gust of wind blew through the scaffolding, carrying the scent of fresh lumber and salt from the nearby bay. I closed my eyes and let it sink in. This was my empire. Not marble floors or glass towers, but something living, breathing, human. My phone buzzed. It was Ryan. "Dad wants to meet you at the pier tonight. Said it's important." I hesitated for a moment, then typed back, "I'll be there." The pier at sunset looked almost exactly as it had when I was a teenager, boats rocking gently, the water reflecting streaks of gold and crimson. My father stood at the end, his hands tucked in his jacket pockets, the wind teasing what was left of his gray hair. He turned when he heard my footsteps. "Didn't think you'd come," he said, a small smile tugging at his mouth. "You always say that," I replied. "And I always do." He chuckled softly. "Fair point." There was a long pause before he spoke again. "You know, I came here a lot this past year. I used to stand right here and think about what I lost. But lately, I've been thinking about what I still have." I raised my eyebrow. "Like what?" He looked out over the water. "You, your brother, your mother, and whatever this new version of me is trying to be." I didn't say anything. He kept talking, voice quiet but sure. "I sold the last of my company's remaining assets last month. Paid off every debt. What's left, I'm donating to the Harbor Street Foundation. Consider it my contribution to your empire." I blinked, stunned. "You're serious?" He nodded. "It's time. I built too much out of ego. You're building something out of purpose. It's about damn time I learned from you." Emotion hit me hard, sharper than I expected. "Dad?" He smiled. And for the first time in years, it wasn't forced. "Don't look so surprised, Emily. Even stubborn old men can change when their daughters remind them what real strength looks like." We stood side by side, watching the waves slap gently against the pier. "Grandma would have liked this," I said finally. "Seeing us here, seeing what it's become. She would have told me I was an idiot," he said with a grin, and then baked me a pie anyway. I laughed, the sound carrying across the water. As the sun sank lower, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "Your grandmother gave me this the day I took over the company," he said. "Told me it wasn't for wealth, it was for wisdom. I think I finally understand what she meant." Inside was her old ring, a simple gold band with a small sapphire in the center. I want you to have it, he said, pressing it into my hand, not because of what it's worth, but because you've earned it. I swallowed hard. Thank you. Promise me something, he added. Don't stop. Don't let comfort make you soft. Keep building. Keep proving that our name can mean something good again, I promise, I said quietly. The last light of sunset glinted off the ring as I slipped it onto my finger. It fit perfectly. When I turned back, he was watching me with that same proud look I'd longed for my whole life. I was wrong about you, he said. You weren't the one who didn't belong in this family. You were the one who was supposed to save it. I felt the tears before I could stop them. He didn't look away. We walked back together as the first stars appeared, the sounds of the harbor settling into night. The next morning, a local paper ran a photo of us from that evening, father and daughter at the pier smiling. The headline read, "Carson Legacy Turns the Tide." I didn't care about the press anymore, but I clipped the article anyway and pinned it on my office wall. A reminder that some stories, even the broken ones, can be rewritten. Later that week, I stood on the steps of the new Harbor Street building as we cut the ribbon for its opening. The crowd cheered, cameras flashed, but what caught my eye was Dad standing quietly at the back, hands in his pockets watching with pride. Ryan stood beside him clapping. Mom waved from the front row, eyes bright with tears. When I spoke, my voice carried across the courtyard, steady and sure. This isn't just a building. It's a promise that no matter where you come from or what's been lost, it's never too late to rebuild. Not just structures, but people, families, futures. The applause rose again, but what mattered most were the faces in front of me. Families moving into their new homes, kids holding keys, laughter echoing through the place that had once been a battleground. As the ceremony ended, I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was Dad. You were right, he said softly. It's not about ownership, it's about stewardship. I smiled. You finally read Grandma's plaque. He grinned. Maybe twice. We both laughed, and for the first time it didn't feel like forgiveness or surrender. It felt like something cleaner, something whole. Later, as the crowd dispersed, I stood alone on the balcony overlooking the street. The sun was setting again, the light golden and kind. For years I'd thought revenge would heal me, that justice meant balance, punishment, victory. But as the lights came on, one by one down Harbor Street, I realized the truth. Revenge ends things. Redemption rebuilds them. And this was my redemption. It felt like the satisfying final chapter of a complex story I had spent my life writing. The empire wasn't inherited.